Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me the chance to present this work. I also am grateful to Glenn because he already emphasized the importance of ion channels and G-protein coupled receptors, which you will see from our research is also important. And as such, I'm happy to present the part of the PhD work of one of my students, Andrea, also with Steve, a long time postdoc in my lab. It's also a collaboration with Dietrich Mapes. Many of you know him. He wanted to be here, but for circumstances he could not, so he sends his best regards. And I'm happy to present a qualitative but also a quantitative analysis of the role of histamine in the stinging spines of an animal that we haven't touched in this conference yet, of the caterpillar Automeris zaruma. So Automeris zaruma, here you see the two stages, the caterpillar stage and then the butterfly adult stage, is an animal, a species covered with spines at the caterpillar stage, and the spines that really serve as a storage room for a true venomous cocktail. The animal, Automeris zaruma, belongs to the Saturnidae, and as you can see here, the caterpillar itself contains remarkable stinging spines, hairs, up to ½ centimeter in length, and they can be found dorsally and subdorsally. Scanning electron microscopy pictures of the spines reveal that in fact all these spines are composed of two elements. You have a thick part here and then a smaller part. And it's assumed that upon mechanical contact, so this small upper part breaks and then leaves, let's say, an opening to the bigger part. And in this hollow, let's say, cavity, the venom components are present. And as such, you, after breaking the smaller needle, you create, in fact, a needle, an active needle that can then inject the venomous cocktail in the skin. The pathology after envenoming or envenomation with the Automeris zaruma can be summarized on 3 levels. There is a clear inflammation, pain, skin rashes, and itch. And this can be seen also in the short movie. You see here one of the persons that had an encounter with this Automeris. You can clearly see that it's quite annoying and also long-lasting. So it's not a simple pathology. Oops. Now, in general, caterpillar envenomation is kind of challenging also in the 21st centuries. If you think about also other caterpillars, like the how do you say in English? The sorry, the name escapes me now. The oak processionary moth, the oak processionary moths worldwide, they also cause problems. So it becomes really a challenging thing. And for the moment, only supportive treatments are available. People recommend removing the setae with sticky tapes, avoid scratching, obviously. You can apply topically corticosteroids, but if you do this chronically, of course, there are side effects. And the current antihistaminic drugs on the market, they do show a limited efficacy, and I'll show you also why. So the purpose of our research was, we have this Automeris zaruma. Let's try to find the venom chemistry, and we do this with a triple quadruple time of flight mass spectrometer. Let's also try to bioactivity of find the bioactivity of the venom. What are the key targets or target in this pathway, in hope to find a therapy to treat the envenomation. So the experimental setup mainly in my lab is twofold, and this is to remember for the next slides. So we, since many years, successfully use this Xenopus laevis heterologous expression system. And as Glenn already said, so we have now about 75 cloned cDNAs that encode many, many ion channels, voltage-gated, ligand-gated, GPCRs, bacterial, viral channels, and we can successfully express them after subcloning into a high expression vector, and then wait a couple of days, see protein expression, and then by means of voltage clamp or eventually patch clamp, you can do then the bioassay. Alternatively, we apply high-resolution triple quadruple time of flight mass spectrometry to pinpoint what type of molecules are in the venom, and then we try to link the two sets. So what is the target? The target, first of all, we had our bioassay to validate. So what you see here is in high potassium, high K, high potassium, it's an external solution that we use, and the horizontal line is kind of a current line, as over time, where when you apply then the venom, we expect, if there is like phospholipase activity, cytotoxicity, or membrane lysis, that then you would see a deviation of this horizontal line, but nothing happens. So a non-injected oocyte, you can apply the venom, nothing happens. And then on the right, if you inject these oocytes, in this case with an histamine receptor, so the histamine type 4 receptor, it's a G protein coupled receptors, and we co-injected it also with effector channels. They are called G protein inward rectifying potassium channels 1 and 2, and they're known to, let's say, answer to an activated GPCR via the endogenous G protein in the oocyte. And then what you measure, so that's the readout, what you measure is in fact potassium currents through these channels. And here you see, so you start in blue, you go to the high K solution just to increase the driving force to have an appreciable current. Then you apply, in this case, histamine, 1 micromolar. You see a nice response. You can wash it out, and then you can go back to the classical physiological buffer. So this is a way to standardize the bioassay, and this is very robust and reliable for the H4 type histamine receptor. So what we learned from Automeris saruma venom, it indeed targets the histamine receptors and also the mass-related G protein coupled receptor X2. To summarize here, so the H4 histamine receptor, here you see again the validation. You apply histamine, you see a nice activation. And then if you apply the venom of this caterpillar, you also see a very, very abundant activation that can be reversibly washed out. On the bottom, this mass-related G protein coupled receptor, X2, that is also important in inflammation and itch. Same, you apply an agonist for this receptor. It's then not histamine, but here it's this compound. And the Automeris venom exactly is also capable of activating, let's say, the receptor and then measuring K currents through these HIRIC1 and 2 effector channels. As Glenn said, we have an abundance of other targets. So we checked the selectivity. To start, let's say we have cannabis receptors cloned, CB1, CB2, we can express them functionally. So WIN is a famous agonist of CB2. You apply WIN, and then as a control, if you apply the venom on cannabis receptors, absolutely nothing to see. Then we have a whole bunch of TRP channels. TRPV1 is important also in pain cessation. With capsaicin, of course, you see the response, and then with the venom, nothing to see. Then the bradykinin receptors we can also check. It's also a G protein coupled receptor, no effect. Then the voltage-gated sodium channel 1.8, one of the nociceptors, there is no effect on this channel. Then we have the nicotinic type acetylcholine receptor, again, no effect. And also because of lack of space, we checked also the ASIC1A, where Glenn talked about, and ASIC1A is also not affected by the venom. So there is some selectivity found related to receptors that are G protein coupled and play a role in, let's say, itch, pain, inflammation. So far, we checked only the histamine 4, because very little was known. You have to know that in the human genome, we only have 4 isoforms. And we've been able to successfully clone them, subclone them, express them. And then we were interested whether this caterpillar venom affects all types of histamine receptors in our human genome, and the answer is yes. So here you see for the type 4, also for the type 3, you see the activation, for the type 2, and for the type 1 also, but here let's say the appearance is different. Why? Because we know that the histamine type 1 couples to different type of G proteins, not GS or GIO, but more GQ. So the effects that you see here in oocytes are not, let's say, the result of activated HIRIC channels, but more chloride conductances, calcium activated, and calcium signals that you measure. But at least you can measure it, so the readout is a bit different. That's the only case. So in summary, the venom is capable of activating all types of histamine receptors. Yeah, by what? What toxin? What is the mechanism? So then we went to the analytics with our QTOF, and we were able to indeed, and this is a bit faint, my apologies, but histamine is there, so we were very happy qualitatively to show that histamine was in the spines of these Automeris present, and we were also able to quantify it. So we checked that 1.2 microgram per microliter venom extract contained 1 micromolar. And this was interesting to see whether the dose response curves when we applied venom were, let's say, correlating with that histamine concentrations that we expect. And this is the case. So when you do dose response curves for the four types of histamine receptors that we now can compare, we were quite surprised that in fact, H1 and H2 type, you have micromolar affinity, but 3 and 4, it's nanomolar. So you can see here, 3 and 4, it's more sensitive to react to the venom, and of course then histamine in the venom. And what is then now the problem today? Well, the current clinically used antihistaminic drugs mainly are H1 or H2 type antagonists. So they have a limited efficacy against, let's say, these caterpillar envenomations. Of course, you can say probably other components are hidden in the venomous cocktail. That's true. So here, this mass-related GPR-X2, it's a very, very, let's say, trendy, almost orphan type of GPCR that becomes more and more interesting and being studied worldwide because it has a role in inflammatory pain. And it's also, let's say, responsible for non-IgE mediated pseudo-allergic reactions. And also, to our surprise, this Automeris venom, just like the natural ligand for this receptor, is capable of activating the receptor. However, if you then apply histamine on this type of receptor, nothing happens. So this means that in the caterpillar venom, there must be other components, of course, that, like in the previous slide, induce this activation. This is ongoing research, we don't know yet, but of course it's going to be interesting to find what type of molecule, toxin, small molecule peptide is responsible for that. How can we treat now envenomation? Well, it's a pity, in fact, there is a Johnson & Johnson compound called 777120. Because of side effects, it was withdrawn from the market, but this is a very nice one, in fact, to treat because it's an H4 type antagonist, one of the few. And as you can see, so in a series of experiments, you apply histamine, you apply the venom, and if you pre-treat, let's say, then the cell with this J&J compound, you apply histamine, and then following by the venom of the Automeris, nothing happens. So it's really a very effective, let's say, antidote or antagonist. So we hope that, and it's a small molecule, we hope that, let's say, analogs of this J&J compound may be developed with fewer side effects. So more research is needed on that field, but my take-home message is we have to consider adding H3 and H4 type antagonists to the current clinical medication because it certainly will benefit well-being of the patient. Since no 4 and 3 type antagonists are in clinical use, we have to further investigate the modulation of this mass-related G protein X2 type of receptor. A therapy including these drugs may not only be beneficial in treating caterpillar venomation, but also for other dermatitis and inflammation-related diseases, we believe. And with this, I end. I'm grateful to Dietrich Meeps for providing the venom and also for the SAM photos. And this is then part of my lab with Andrea here on the left, the PhD student who works on this caterpillar. If you would be interested in reading more, it just was accepted and published online in the Frontiers in Immunology. So it's just out, and if there you can find more details. With this, I end, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jan. Questions? Jan?
And what's in the venom?
Ongoing, probably much more than, of course, histamine, that's clear. But for the histamine receptor, we have no indication yet that there are, let's say, important molecules or enzymes we are missing. Because if you apply the venom on a non-injected cell, the viability remains absolutely intact. So it's not cytotoxic, cytolytic. There is a perfect match with the histamine concentration we find in the venom and the dose response curves. But you're right, probably there are many more other toxins or
how does it look in a...
Well, at the end, we see a lot of peaks, probably indicating higher molecule proteins or enzymes. And this probably is also the reason why this mass-related receptor is activating by components we still have to discover.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think what most people here don't know is there's I think at least 13 independent evolutions of venom within the caterpillar family, right? And certainly the ones that we looked at, they all look very different depending on which particular group you look at. And it seems like yours is mainly protein rich, not peptide rich. Is that right? From what you're saying?
Yes. It seems that this one is especially rich in histamine because we also checked the oak processionary moth.
Yeah.
And there the histamine concentration is much, much lower, if not almost absent, which was a surprise. Again, in terms of peptides, like smaller peptides that we know from spiders, scorpions, etc., it doesn't seem to be present a lot. But the bigger ones we still have to explore.
Interesting.
But for the oak processionary moth, transcriptomic research is going on, and we have some evidence, not at the proteomic level, but some, you can expect everything there. So it is there, but we don't know to what extent it's really in the venom present.
And you don't have a transcript name of this guy yet?
Of this one, no.
No, okay.
No.
Hi, Jem. Thank you so much for speaking, and congratulations to Andrea on all her work. I'm sure you must be very proud of what she's done. Just out of interest, pardon, this might be a little outside the work you do, but what happens to the expression of the venom when the animal pupates and becomes a moth?
Good question. I'm not an expert in that field, so I can only speculate. I think, of course, when you have the butterfly, it's devoid of any spines and toxicity. So it's, in my opinion, only a temporary, let's say, mechanism of nature where then the caterpillar is most vulnerable. So it's a strategy to survive in a particular stage of growing elderness, and then it stops. These spines, they can be lost also, depending on the age of the caterpillar. So it's not a constant giving.
Superb. I think you have a caterpillar convert. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can add to that. There's no adult moths or caterpillars that are venomous. It's always the caterpillars. All right, I think we should, in the interest of time, move on. So, any questions online? No? Okay, in the interest of time, we should move on. Thank you very much, Jan.